Welcome to the Success Ascent. Today we are joined by Dave Jenks, 8-time author, co-author of the national best-selling book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, which is certainly about real estate, however, could apply to any entrepreneurial business. There were 3 things that Dave shared in our conversation today that I'd like to share with you before we get started. The first, he says, is learn everything you can from where you're at the time. He says, love what you do and the opportunities will follow. And finally, he says, write your own story full of courage and insight. I know you're going to enjoy our session today, so on to the ascent, the Success Ascent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Success Ascent podcast today. My name is Pat Mancuso. I am the creator and host of the podcast, and I am so excited to be with you today. We have a gentleman here today that I've known for a long time. He's an incredibly talented individual, been a mentor to me, someone who I've walked alongside in the growth of Keller Williams Realty. And Dave Jenks is an 8-time author, national bestseller. He's created a number of businesses. He's coached and he's mentored a number of individuals. And I'm just excited to have Dave here today. He's going to share his wisdom on success, the challenges, the ceilings he's broken through, the things that he's learned to help us all grow. Instead of reinventing the model, others have gone before us. He's going to share with us those things that he's learned over the years that's helped him become an incredibly successful entrepreneur. So Mr. Jenks, Dave Jenks, welcome today.
Thank you, Pat. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, and thank you for those kind words of introduction. And I love what you're doing to share with others this idea of what has gotten people to where they've achieved. And I think that people, all of us, I myself have lived through the work of role models. So having role models makes a big difference in life.
Well, Dave, you've had an incredible journey, and there's so many things that you've accomplished and opportunities that you've had. And I want to go back to the kind of early days of Dave Jenks as an entrepreneur. What were the things that you experienced or learned that truly helped you become what you are today?
Well, what's interesting about that, and it's a long journey with several chapters in it, of course, but the thing is, I didn't start out to be an entrepreneur. I wasn't even in the world of business. My father was a blue-collar union worker, anti-ownership, anti-management, in a sense, anti-business. So I was not raised in any environment that supported that. And I got to it later. But I will tell you, if I say early on, what I always wanted to do was learn everything I could from where I was at the time. So I love sports. I loved extracurricular activities. When I went to college, I became editor of the college newspaper. I worked in my fraternity. I took on leadership roles. And because I think every situation I was in, I said, what can I learn from this situation, right? What can I learn that will be valuable to me? And as I did that, I built up a set of skills, a bandwidth, I call it, of things over time, so that when later in my life, truthfully, not until I was in my 30s, did I get exposed to the world of business in any way. And it surprised me because I went, wow, this is an interesting environment, right? And then I got exposed to the world of entrepreneurs, people who own their own businesses. And I went, whoa, this is exciting. And so I would just say it took me a long time to be ready for that opportunity. And I would just say to anyone, everything you can do to add to your knowledge and skills wherever you are, that's going to serve you in the long run.
Well, what's interesting, Dave, is as I talk with folks like you, there's a commonality. There's a number of things that are common. And one of those is being learning-based. And so what else did you do in learning-based from the standpoint, they'll read and they'll maybe have coaches or mentors. Was there anything else that you did to kind of increase that trajectory from a learning perspective?
Yeah, in fact, it was like every time I was involved in something, particularly say at the college level, I always said, okay, what is it here? What can I learn from this coach? What can I learn from this teacher? What can I learn from this mentor? I had 2 or 3 executive mentors who were in the college university environment, but they became mentors to me. One was about being assertive in everything you do. Another one was about being an executive and having a plan. He told me, his name was Dr. Clifton C. Thorne. He said, the unplanned day is not worth living. And I went, whoa, right? And the other gentleman who said, you know, you need to assert what you want in every environment you're in. And he was the president of a college that I got to know through our alumni association. So those mentors, well then, when I got in the world of business and I was VP of sales and marketing for a graphic arts company, I knew I didn't know anything about selling. So being learning based, a friend of mine guided me to the Dale Carnegie sales course. He said, they have a sales course. Of course, they have a course in public speaking and human relations too, but this was their sales course. Well, I went and took it, and I learned that selling is a profession. There are skills, there are ways you guide people to make a buying decision. You know, selling is a process. And so it was interesting because I would just tell you, Pat, that foundation of learning these fundamentals of communication and sales and marketing just really then served me the rest of my career. So I would say that. I would say that was a good example of a learning experience.
Well, you talked about fundamentals, and you know, fundamentals are so important. So if there were a couple of fundamentals other than being learning based that's helped you in this journey of success, any that come to mind?
Oh, absolutely. I think number one is human relations. I think that one of the things I learned early, this was actually even before I went to the Dale Carnegie sales course, I read his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a classic. It's still in the top 200 every year on Amazon.com of books sold, because it hasn't lost its truth. Also, his book, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living, is the fundamentals of mental health and mental strength, mental toughness, you know, how to deal with adversity. Here are two books written back in the 30s and 40s, and they still are truthful and timely. So I think that also made me understand that the things that matter most in life have been here for a long time, right? I mean, the fundamental truths that matter have been here for a long time. So I'd say human relations is one. Here's the second one, public speaking. And I don't mean just, you know, being an orator or something. It's having the courage to stand up and speak your mind, to stand up in front of a group and articulate yourself and not be so concerned about what other people think, or being afraid that you're going to make a fool of yourself or whatever. So I'd say that's second, public speaking. The third one is writing. See, I mean, I had a chance, as you said, to write several books and co-authored. In most cases, I'm a synergistic guy. I do better working with people than I do by myself. So I've been a co-author of many books. And the thing is, though, I had to learn those writing skills. Well, it's interesting. Everyone can learn writing skills. Now, I was not a natural writer. I was a naturally curious reader, so I did a lot of reading, but I wasn't a natural writer, and I'm not a natural writer. I don't sit down and spend hours, you know, on the keyboard typing stuff out. I just don't. However, because I gave myself the opportunity to start to build and learn my writing skills, and I'll tell you the place I did that, and it's funny how opportunities show up. So when for the very first time in my adult, well, let's say, in high school and college, I played a sport every season. I was full bore in sports the whole way. When I got to my sophomore year in college, my college didn't have a football team, so I couldn't play football, but I played soccer as a freshman, had never played it before, but got to play and was athletic enough to do it. But then the second year, I really knew I wasn't good enough to be on the varsity. And so I said, okay, I resigned from the team. And then I said, well, okay, what am I going to do with all this free time? Well, I went over to the college newspaper and said, do you need somebody to write about sports? I love sports. So I started that journey, and then that led me to a whole bunch of writing experiences in that journalistic nature. Right now, the reason I'm putting this out there as a story is you don't know where the opportunity is going to show up. I just showed up and started writing sports stories. Then I wrote feature stories. Then I became editor of the newspaper. Then I learned how to write a journalistic article and do the research and make good headlines and all that stuff. And I would just say, Pat, that set of skills has really been, underpinned my career the whole time. But that's where I learned them, right? That's where I learned them, because I had the opportunity. So that fundamentally is the thing. Every time you see an opportunity to learn something new, take it on.
Well, and you said you had the opportunity, and I guess what I would offer is you actually took advantage of the opportunity. It was there, and it was probably there to a lot of people. And what holds people back many times is they look at that opportunity and they think maybe I'll fail at it, or what if I'm not good at it, and therefore they never take advantage of the opportunity. And what you point out, which I think is common for business owners, entrepreneurs, is that they do put themselves out there. They do take that risk, that opportunity, because either they know they're going to succeed or they're going to learn, which comes back to that other fundamental that you shared. So
Well,
that,
it does. And I would say this, a lot of people in this modern age say, do what you love and the money will follow. See, I don't believe that in any way. Some people who find their passion early, that works out early. But to me, here's the lesson I learned. Love what you do and the opportunities will follow. In other words, whatever you do, do it with love. So when I dove into working on this newspaper, I did it with love.
right.
I dove right in and I said, okay, what do you need? How do you write the sports story? And I listened to the editors about how to write better and all that stuff. And I learned my, keyboard skills. And then other opportunities would show up. And I would tell you that I think only applied for one job in my life. All the other jobs were offered to me. And the reason they were offered to me was because those people observed me doing something else and doing it with love, doing it with focus, doing it with intention, right? So whatever you're at now, do it the best you can and do it with love, and the opportunities will come from that.
Well, and when you do that, obviously you're much happier, your energy is much higher, and therefore that'll show up in the opportunity, right?
Well, it does, and it's interesting. Modern psychology. You talk about where all this has gone. The modern psychology, that is really led by Dr. Martin Seligman. It's called positive psychology, and he said we've spent all these years studying mental disorder and mental disease, and it's time for us to understand mental health and mental performance. And so he started this movement called positive psychology, which is an extension of cognitive psychology, which is getting out of the old, thematic, ego id analysis of Freudian psychology. But what's really come out of that is this sense of that happiness isn't the result of being successful. Happiness is the cause of being successful. When you work to make yourself happy in the circumstances you're in, it will lead to the success that you want. And I think that's an interesting switch that I would have people understand. Don't wait for happiness, seek it now, live it now, and it will guide you to the right places.
Kind of make that decision to be happy and then move forward versus waiting for it.
And find ways. I mean, it's not always easy, right? I mean, that's the other thing I found for myself. I had to deal with a history of cyclical depression in my family. My grandfather spent the last 20 years in the nursing home, basically catatonic. My dad had mood swings. And I, in my 30s, started to feel those mood swings. I'd go dark places and I'd wonder why, I felt so negative about things, but those emotions were there. And in fact, just at the end of, in my late 30s, I almost committed suicide. I was that desperate and that negative, and fortunately came up out of it. But that forced me to start to think about what is it that I'm doing that's making me feel this dark, right? And I got introduced to a book called Feeling Good by Dr. David Burns. And that book is kind of the fundamentals in cognitive psychology. And in there, he says, here are the 10 ways you think that cause you to be either panicked or fearful or depressed. And when you start to see those, and then you start to you feel your mind going in that direction, you go, oh, no, that's near the edge of the cliff. Don't go there. But you start to then self-manage your thinking. It's not a high control thing, but you start to direct your thinking in the way that's more productive. And of course, the ultimate end of that is optimism and happiness.
Well, awareness is so important. And, they say that the mind is very powerful and it can be destructive. And that's kind of what you just shared.
Absolutely, it can. And particularly those of us that are thoughtful and aspiring people who want to do more and accomplish more in life and are tied into that part of our God-given nature, then we tend to be self-judgmental.
Yeah.
right? Oh, we're not getting we're not doing as well as we wanted. Oh, it's not turning out the way that we wanted. Oh, people don't like us like we'd like them to like us. And, and it's easy to take all that in and start to go in that spiral downward. And you learn that it's a momentum issue. Your energy and your attitude and your productivity is a momentum issue. And the momentum can go either way. And what you want to do is push it up. So the spiral is moving toward a higher level of consciousness and a higher level of productivity and creativity.
Absolutely. So Dave, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your success journey. If you could look back and, you've had incredible points of success that I know about and some that I don't even know about. What do you think caused you to keep going? Because we all hit ceilings and we have to do certain things to break through that ceiling. And if we don't, then we'll kind of resign ourselves. And so what did you do when you were hitting those ceilings?
Well, it's interesting, Pat. I think one of the things is to sort of have this mindset that there are no ceilings. In other words, it just means that you don't view something as a ceiling. You view it as a readiness now to move to another level, right? So I had to learn how to be a better executive. For example, when I was with Century 21 and I was a district manager and I wanted to become regional director. First of all, I learned write down your goals. That was one of the big things that was funny. I wasn't until I was like 40 years old that I understood that written goals really mattered, because but prior to that, I was just kind of using my energy and go at it. And,
I know where I want to go and I just go.
I just go and I just do whatever has to be done, that kind of thing. And I'm sure I was running into not ceilings, just not only ceilings, walls. I was probably running into walls and doors. But the point was that I said, oh, wow, isn't this amazing? If you write things down, they happen. So here's the funny thing. Here I am, this little district manager in Syracuse, New York, earning like $18,000 a year. And I wrote down a goal that I wanted to be the regional director for Century 21 of this 3-state or of a region, but the one I was in was a 3-state region, making over 6 figures, right? 3 years later, I was. 3 years later.
Wow.
From that time, I was the regional director of Century 21 of New York, making $125 grand a year, which at that time was a big deal. And there I was. Well, then I had to learn, then you talk about ceilings. Well, sometimes the ceiling, I don't know how to put this. Sometimes it's better to put yourself in a place where it feels like you're way over your head, right? In other words, when you take something on, you are nowhere near ready to take it on, but you go, I'm taking it on, right? And it was funny because I was sitting there when I was writing that goal of wanting to become regional director. I said, ooh, that would be a lot of stress. I'd be the CEO. I'd be the guy that had to make all the decisions. I'd have all these people expecting things of me and all that, right? I'd be really stressed out. And then I said, I can't be more stressed than I am now. I'm trying to do so good a job at what I'm doing now, I stress myself out, right? So I realized that the higher you go in an organization, you don't get more stress. What you get is more resources to deal with the stress. You have staff, you have, those kind of things. So anyway, I took a little different view of stress. But what I would say in that is that writing down goals is a big deal. Thinking about what you want and putting it down and writing that is a big deal, bigger than people realize. And it's really interesting because all the research says fewer than 10, even fewer than 8% of people have written goals. And yet they are far and away achieving those people that don't. So the written goal setting process, and as we teach the 135 and the 411 and those kind of tools that allow you to be more planful. And then here's the extension of that. So when I was then became not only the regional director of that region, but then 3 years later was asked to move to Texas and become the first regional director of a mega region. We combined 2 regions and that became a division. My business plan became the model for all of Century 21. Because I had learned the power of how to write down goals and how to get clear about what outcomes you're trying to achieve. When you build that skill of planning and being planful, wow, then you can build organizations. Then you can build big operations.
Well, and that's a fundamental that most people miss.
It is
they don't have those goals.
They don't learn the process. That's right. You see, it's almost like they're not aware of the magic, right? My wife calls it manifesting. How do you manifest what you want in your life? One of the key things is you get it clear in your mind. And the way you get it clear in your mind is you write it down.
Right. And then your mind focuses on it, and it goes back to the whole power of the mind.
Oh, it does, which is the power of the subconscious mind is just incredible, right? It's just unbelievable.
So Dave, I'm guessing not everything has been cherries and ice cream and roses and there's been some speed bumps along the way.
Yes.
Tell us.
Sure, many speed bumps.
Absolutely. Tell us one that it was really impactful for you, maybe from a business standpoint and a personal standpoint, maybe combined in both, that allowed that trajectory then just kind of catapulted you through, because that's typically what happens when we have setbacks. I know that's been true for me, and I'm sure true for you.
Well, I think, let me reflect just quickly back on the one I said. I think dealing with my own mental state and my own depression and my own suicidal, part of me, that was big, because I turned around out of that and then became an incredible, powerful optimist and a powerful enthusiast. And everyone would say in any organization I've been a part of, wow, Dave just brings it, right? Dave's got this can-do, positive, optimistic energy. Sharon Gibbons, who was the chief financial officer of Keller Williams when I first joined it, she'd say, if you're having a bad day, go talk to Dr. Feelgood.
I love that.
My office, go talk to Dr. Feelgood. And I do. I feel good, and I make other people feel good, because I think that's a fundamental truth in life. So I would say that was one big springboard. But here's the other one. I had to overcome alcoholism. I was using alcohol as an escape from this kind of high energy, aspirational nature. And, so I had to calm myself down, maybe, I thought, or I had to get rid of some of my anxieties. And, so I started drinking. Mm-hmm. Now, I wasn't one of those knockdown, drag out, blackout drunks, but that doesn't matter. I was using it. And a good friend of mine, guided me to Alcoholics Anonymous, which is always a hard thing to do, to guide people to something they think they don't need, right?
Right.
But I went, and I'll tell you what that did to me. One is it released the alcoholism, but the other is it brought me back in touch with God. Because in the 12-step process, you turn your life and your will over to the care of God. And you live with this attitude of gratitude and blessing. And then you're always seeking wisdom from that higher power. And when you realize, it's almost like that, what we talked about, the power of the unconscious, right? Well, there's the same thing, and maybe it's probably related to this power of your higher power. The one thing about a relationship with God is the belief that all of this has purpose, that what you're doing has purpose, that it has meaning, there are standards that matter, and that you can call on that power when you're in trouble or when you need guidance. And you can say a prayer. I pray before every session I teach. I prayed before this interview that I would be able to say and convey those things that would be beneficial to people, that were real and true and authentic. And so I would say that really opened me up. And one of the things that took away, Pat, from me was this care about what other people thought about me. Now, it's not cavalier. It's not that I don't care. It's just that it doesn't control me, right? I'm not doing my life to try and please other people. I'm not teaching a class so they think, oh, isn't Dave a good teacher? I'm doing it for what I believe is the right purpose. And if they like it, fine. If they don't like it, that's okay too, right? And that gave me this level of confidence and this level of well, I guess that's just it. Self-empowerment.
Yeah. That
was so good that it really then led to all those things that I was able to do, particularly in writing the books and building organizations.
Yeah. One of the things that I've always been taught, and I've taught as a coach and a consultant and a mentor, is when you allow other people to define you, they'll generally define you at less than they see themselves, because that makes them feel good. And you just touched on that you have a choice to buy into that story that they want to create for you, or buy into your own story. And whichever one you buy into is what you're going to end up with. So
well, it is. And you want to write your own, of course.
Absolutely.
You want to write your own story. You want to live your own story. You want to let your story be full of moments of courage and insight. As Gary Keller says, you fail your way to success. So you really bring on things that you might fail at. You really might. Things might not work out. I think confidence is overrated. I think it's important to do things when you're not confident, right? I always say, let fear be your compass, because the only reason you're fearful of doing something is you care about the outcome. And if you care about the outcome, that means you were meant to do it. So if you fear something or you're not confident about it, go do it. And what will happen is you'll get on the other side of it and say, what was I afraid of? That'll be one thing. And the other thing is it'll expand your bandwidth. Or back in Dale Carnegie, we used to call it your comfort zone. Yeah. It'll expand your comfort zone. And
you develop more skills.
And that's right. And I think I call that bandwidth. I think one of the goals in life for any of us is to expand our bandwidth. What new skills can we add? What new understandings? What new knowledge can we learn? And what capacities and we'll only do that by challenging yourself and going through things that you're not comfortable doing. And then you become comfortable, right? You get to that level of conscious competence and then unconscious competence.
Yeah. So Dave, you touched on a couple of things. I want to segue a little bit to the world we're living in today.
Yeah.
We've got the pandemic, we've got the times with social inequality and the unrest, and it feels like people want to have conversations, except they don't want to have conversations in some cases, and just all that's there. And having gone through what you've gone through personally, I think you might be able to speak to, how are you having conversations with people right now in business about what's going on in our world and COVID, and just anything you would share around that?
Yeah, it's one of the fundamentals of the presentation, interestingly, that I got to make at Family Reunion, even though we were pre-COVID, at least in any sort of high-level awareness way. And that is that it is about self-mastery. It's the first of the 6 personal disciplines, the 6 personal perspectives. It's learning how to master your own emotions and your own feelings. Now, in this time of high adversity, that matters a lot. And I think the thing is, I follow the sort of the philosophy of the Stoics. There's a wonderful a website called The Daily Stoic, STOIC.com, and it does a daily feed. And the Stoics were those Greek and Roman philosophers that really understood that life is full of adversity, life is full of difficulty. It's happened, it happens again and again. They were dealing back, 2,000 years ago with pandemics, worldwide pandemics, and wars and terrorism and criminality and all that stuff. And I think that what you have to do is get in your own comfortable place or your own strong place. And that is to say, I can only change that which I can change, right? It's the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that's a wonderful posture and a place to be. So I encourage people today to focus only on that which they can control. Don't listen to all these news reports and things going on around the world and all that, because you can't change any of that. And your curiosity might want to know, and that kind of dark side of you might want to kind of buy into it. But the thing is, don't. Stay productive, stay loving and strong with the people that are around you, doing the things that matter right now.
Yeah.
That's one side. The other side is speak your truth. Speak your truth. It's not about yelling and screaming and who's the loudest and who's the meanest and who's the strongest. And it's treating other people with manners and respect and giving them the right to speak their mind and listen to what they have to say. But don't sit back and not speak your mind, because that means that the loud, aggressive, perhaps badly motivated people will be the ones that take over. And I love the great American life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness country that we have. And it's at risk right now because of these forces that are disruptive and radical, that want to destroy Western civilization.
Mhm.
And they are evil forces. And we need to stand up and call it for what it is.
Yes.
And so that takes the courage, right? That's the courage part. But you don't do it by calling people names and being aggressive. You do it by just as rationally as you can expressing what you think the truth is.
Absolutely.
These are testing times.
Oh, there's no doubt. And I love the awareness or the self-awareness. So what's Dave doing now? I mean, you're always, doing things and creating opportunities. I mean, what are you doing? What's going on in your world right now?
I'll tell you what, there's really three things that are big, maybe a fourth. One is that I've re-engaged with Keller Williams for a very simple reason. I helped build that company to the greatest real estate company in the history of the world and the largest in the world today.
Sure did.
And I believe that it has a power of truth underneath it. And I'm going back in and doing Zoominars and all that around the system. I'm not an employee of the company. I haven't been hired to do this. I'm doing it of my own accord so that people are reminded of the fundamental truths that make this company a great company, and also how to succeed in it, right? How to have success in their own real estate career. So that's one. The second thing is I'm writing my memoirs, I guess you might call it. It's a book called Seeker, A Journey Toward Wisdom, because all of my life has been driven by curiosity. So I cover all kinds of topics, all the ones you shouldn't talk about, right? I cover in the book, and the wisdom I've gained from there. And the extension of that, really, it's almost like a separate chapter, is something I've just now done 7 podcasts on, called The 7 Incarnations of God. And it's a scientific look at the nature of God and the nature of creation and the nature of the purpose of our life. And I do it because there's all of these self-appointed atheists who say they're the scientists and there is no proof of God and there is all this. And I go, my God, you're blind. If that's really what you see, you aren't a scientist, you're blind.
Right.
And so what I do with the 7 incarnations is I take people through a thought process of how you can know not only there is a God, but what that God's intention and purpose is, right? And so it's very interesting. That's kind of that extension. And then the other thing is I'm just building a happy, joyous life with my wife, Gina. Met her 3 years ago. We were meant for each other. We've just moved to the Dallas area, and she's a mentor for women, a women's empowerment guide, brilliant in what
Absolutely.
she does for that. And of course, then I'm working over on the other side, and we just redid DaveJenks.com. So if anyone wants to get in contact with any of this material, it's all there for free downloads and listens. Just DaveJenks.com.
I love that. I went there this morning, and there's some great stuff there. That's fun. Well, Dave, so I mean, first of all, you have been a mentor and a coach and certainly a leader in my journeys. And so as we kind of close here, what would you share? Like, what would be one final thought or something you would share as an impact statement as we move away from our conversation today?
Believe in yourself and your purpose. Believe that you're here for a reason. The reasons may not be grandiose. The reasons may be just what you're doing today. Do that with love and optimism. Use every learning opportunity that you have to expand your wonderful God-given human capacities, and do it in your own unique way. God created you to be unique, and so you get to do it in your own way. Trust that.
I love that. I love that. Well, so I think you already mentioned it. I just want to make sure if anybody wants to get in touch with you, DaveJenks.com, best place to do that.
Yep. Yes.
Awesome. And I can't wait to read the new book. I mean, the just everything you've described. Like, when is it going to be out? When is it going to be out?
Yeah, well, that's the one problem. I don't think I haven't written that goal down yet. I wrote down the goal that I want to write this book called Seeker, but I didn't give it a deadline yet. So I think that's probably the next step I have.
So there's the aha from the call from you. I
think I better put a timeline on this.
There you go. There you go. Well, Dave, again, I just can't tell you how grateful I am that you joined us today. And oh my gosh, the notes I have and that we'll be able to share and the impact that this session is going to have on people. I just truly want to thank you For everybody that's listening, we so appreciate you listening and look forward to our next session of the Success Ascent podcast. Thanks, everybody. Have an awesome day. Take care. Thanks so much for stopping by the Success Ascent podcast today. I trust that we delivered on our commitment to you to provide a significant return on investment of your time. If you've not yet subscribed, please go to your favorite podcast source and subscribe to the Success Ascent, or simply go to www.thesuccessascent, and that's ASCENT.com, thesuccessascent.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to catching you on the next ascent.